Welcome back, everyone. I hope you guys enjoyed your lunch. Before we move on with our panel discussion, I wanted to announce another raffle winner. So pull out your tickets. All right, if you have ticket number 598120, you are the winner, so raise your hand. All right, can you go? All right, another winner will be announced after our breakout sessions. Now the time has come for our panel discussion, where 4 experts will discuss how to connect stories to audiences and analyze their impacts. Alex McPherson is the Director of Insights and Analytics for the International Communications Agency, Fleishman Hillard. He is an expert at uncovering... Are you coming up here? Okay. He is an expert at uncovering digital insights, and he has spearheaded strategy-informing work for over 50 companies across several industries, including Cisco Systems, the United States Navy, and also YMCA of the United States of America. Jen Duong is the Director of Virtual Reality for the LA-based creative and production agency 1215 Creative. She is also the co-founder of Shift, an organization that supports equality, diversity, and inclusion in the future technologies. Jen oversees all things VR, ranging from creative ideation to production to post-production and distribution strategies. Avery Tim, the managing editor at Huffington Post Riot, oversees the editorial staff and vision. Before returning to work in the media, she acted as a creative at Carrot Creative, Vice's digital agency, specializing in gaming clients and content. And finally, Ben Roffee, who you guys have already met. He is our Reed College of Media Innovator in Residence and also the digital director at Huffington Post Riot. He is going to serve as the moderator for this panel today. Since working at Riot, Ben has helped to create immersive stories and engage audiences with experiences that bring attention to issues happening all around the world. I hope that this panel serves as an insightful experience to all of you. We have allocated questions at the end, but now I'm going to hand it over to Ben.
Good to see you again, guys. How's lunch? There you go. So I think to get started, I want everyone to get a sense of what everyone's expertise is here. One, because it's a great way to get to know who we are as professionals, but also because in the workshops, we'll be building off of some of our respective skill sets and helping you all develop ideas as well. So we're going to start with, I guess since we have Avery's queued up, Avery's going to talk about a project that she worked on at Riot. Yeah, take it away.
I really wish we could have started this in like 4-part harmony. The little doo-wop. Yeah.
Can't sing.
Probably
Avery.
good that we didn't. So yeah, I'm Avery. I'm the managing editor at Riot. I've been there since September. And before that, I was working for Vice's digital agency, Carrot. So I was working primarily on the branded side. But my experience has always been kind of in video content in particular. So my kind of case study today is about a project that we did for the Women's March. So in November, it came to our attention that a march was happening the day after Donald Trump's inauguration, and it was being led by women. And so we decided to essentially descend on Washington with a group of 9 women from Riot. And I think what was really interesting about this story in particular was that at the heart of it, it was the Women's March. But we really went hard on creating an ecosystem around this. And in particular, I think what makes a really good story is how multidimensional it is. So for this Women's March, we had a bunch of different content pieces that we did. We had what you're seeing right now is a 360 live stream that we did in partnership with Facebook. This is, I think, the second of its kind. So that's me in my pink pussy hat being really obnoxious. That's Joy, my co-host, right next to me. She doesn't have a pussy hat yet, but she gets one later. So we had a bunch of different things that we did for this piece in particular. We had a 360 live stream. We did 4 different short documentaries one in partnership with Google, one in partnership with Hulu, one in partnership with Facebook. And we spoke to a variety of different women for this as well. We spoke to the Feminist Majority Foundation leader. We spoke to the National Organization for Women leader, Terry O'Neill, Bettina Hager. We spoke to Ellie Smeal, who is the Feminist Majority Foundation president. We spoke to Michaela Angela Davis. And I think the story within this story was really about breaking down barriers, sending an all-female team to cover one of the, I think, the largest day of U.S. protests in history. That really says something in particular about not only what the story was, but how we wanted to cover it. So yeah, and I should mention too that we worked on distributing this piece as far and wide as possible, and we did so by partnering with a bunch of different media organizations. Riot in particular has an audience made up of primarily white, conservative men, which if you look at the comments of this video, there's a lot of mention of sandwiches. So we really use this content to reach a new audience, and we worked with Refinery 29, Huffington Post, and Elle Magazine to do that because they all have, primarily female audiences. So, yeah, I just rambled for a long time. Don't look at the comments. This is a landing page that we created for this. This is part one of the documentary that we did with YouTube. Ooh. Thank you. So this piece in particular was, this is a two-part documentary, and the first part focuses on, actually both parts focus on what kind of happens next after the Women's March. So we focused on the Equal Rights Amendment as kind of a next step for what came next. There were 1.6 million people there. Part two is underneath. This is an article that oops. Yeah, we don't have to watch that, that's okay. This is the Refinery 29 piece that they did. So again, this is a really great way. This was a great way for us to reach a new audience, was by hosting our content on a platform that was speaking more directly to women, so that we could reach audience that we wouldn't reach on our primarily white 25-year-old sitting in a basement audience. This is a piece that we did, this is part two. So yeah. What's the next one? Next one is another, this is another Refinery 29 article that they did. The third link is an interview that we did with Elle about virtual reality and the correlation to fake news. And I think here you see a little bit more of the story within the story. Here she's really focusing on us as a team of 9 women covering this march in particular. I think that Ben touched a little bit in his keynote about perspective. And we thought it was really important for this piece in particular for it to be women behind the camera telling this story. So in all of the scenes, usually we kind of hide beneath our camera so that the journalist is not present. For this one, we really felt like it was important that the viewer knew that the person behind the camera was a woman. So in all of our different 360 pieces, if you turn around to the back, you see me nodding my head. You see my coworkers, Amy and Maria and Karen. Sometimes we're crying. That's important too, for you to see how we're reacting to it. And then we also surrounded it by a halo of different, social media assets. So in the midst of it, I was live tweeting everything. We posted a bunch of content to our Instagram channel. We had Instagram stories going the whole time. We really wanted to make sure that we created a full ecosystem around this one main piece, and the piece was the Women's March. That's the whole team. We're terribly unhappy. So yeah.
I'll also just add that apart from going out and covering it, they literally did everything top to bottom, from the most technical, like nerdy tech stuff to the pre-production, and and just like knocked out of the park. So it was really awesome to just kind of like sit back and let them work their magic. It was a cool experience to see that go down. So
I would just like to add to that, it drives me insane when people assume that women aren't the technical people, because in VR, I hate to break it to you, but there are a lot of us. And I say that as the co-founder of Women in VR. And so it's just, when you're in this new medium, don't ever assume that women can't stitch, or that we can't edit, or that we don't know how to DP, because most of us do, and we do it better than anyone else. Sorry, tangent.
all right, Alex, I think you're up.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and stand just because that's what I do. And we'll be going through slides pretty quickly, so have your work cut out for you. But essentially, just what I want to basically go over very quickly is that analytics in general is storytelling. It bridges really this gap between the stories that all of these wonderful people up here tell with what is the story of how it was interpreted. So we'll start. So lesson 1, patterns. Take a quick look at this. What do you see? It's the number of dots, but it can tell a story. So perhaps you're seeing on the far left side just that small segment of dots. Did they separate from the other group, or perhaps was there a segment right in the middle there that disappeared? Take instead this aspect of the orange dot on this side. Why is it different? Did it choose to be so, or was it made that way? You also look in the top corner over there. There appears to be a missing dot. Now, was that just, did it disappear? Or perhaps, if you look at symmetry, was that an orange dot as well that also disappeared? Our brains are very used to recognizing patterns as we go. And all of these are essentially Gestalt principles where it comes to either symmetry, proximity, difference, where overall that's the root of analytics there is just looking for and identifying patterns. Our brain already knows some of them, but it's then taking what they are and then interpreting them to understand what they can mean. Correlations is next. So you can find the patterns, but not all patterns essentially equal the same thing. Or more perhaps, not all of these patterns are meaningful, I guess you could say. So if you look at this data set right here, it looks here that potentially there's a correlation. You see the large spikes are very, very similar. But when you look into the data further, you see that they actually have very different meanings when it comes to the different geographical regions, which is probably good because these are Google search results for Amanda Bynes and Edward Snowden. And then our final quick lesson is impact sometimes equals intent. And what that essentially means here is, especially to the people who are the storytellers, what did they hope to get out of the story? What was the meaning they hoped to give to the audience? And that can help determine, was that story impactful? And that said, people will find their own types of impacts within stories. But we'll go over just a quick case of one specific YouTube video and did it have impact or not, depending on, well, what the result was. We're looking at Cars 2 HD gameplay compilation. You see it larger. So first starting off is views. This has 128 million views. That is, by any number, a massive number. And in fact, it does become meaningful because this just so happens to be the most popular gaming video on all of YouTube. Why is this the most popular gaming video on all of YouTube? Turns out the basically Cars 2 HD gameplay compilation was just really good SEO terms. And during the popularity of Cars 2, people would essentially sit their child in front of a computer to take their mind off things while the parents went around and did other things. So from this aspect, if you look at, oh, can you go back one slide? Thank you. So those are the results of the story. So people in general probably don't know this is the largest gameplay video. I feel like there's something else there, but that's okay. So now with views per hour, also a very important metric, potentially, as 303 views per hour is still pretty good, especially considering this was uploaded in 2011. Also, if you look at the video tags, this could be another potential thing. So for instance, if you Google Cars 2 or search it on YouTube, essentially, this ends up being the number 4 video you will find there. So if the intent was, make this the best Cars 2 video you can find, it's doing pretty well so far. Also from a monetary perspective, and this is something that people are especially interested in, of course, it quoting there, it looks to have made a lot of money via ads. However, unfortunately not the case as within that article we cited earlier. He only started monetizing it 2 years after it was uploaded, and he ended up missing the boat on its popularity, as you'll see by the views over time. Now, another way to look at things is potentially sentiment. And from there, you can get sentiment out of YouTube with either thumbs ups or thumbs downs. And in this case, from a sentiment perspective, not doing so great. Also, from an engagement perspective, doing absolutely terribly. But again, that's probably because people are putting their kids in front of the video to take their mind off things. Now you have, oh, I put an A instead of an S, possibly? Subs? I don't know, subscriptions driven is what it was supposed to be. Oh no, that looks right. Did not drive many subscriptions. In fact, that only accounts for 5.5% of the total subscriptions on the channel, which, if they only have, let's say, 3 channels, is terrible. If they have, 200 different videos, maybe that's better. But again, it all is in sort of the aspect of, well, how you're viewing it. So overall, on the bright side, virality, which was this case, can lead to unpredictable benefits and opportunities, and really there's no metric to measure that. One last shout out, every single tool I used in this is absolutely free. I didn't get these metrics from something that was behind a paywall. You can download every single one of these tools yourself. And if you want to learn more about analytics, join me later for what I'm calling Last Sunday Night, a YouTube crisis story.
Alex, I'm gonna have to ask that you don't dig into Riot's YouTube analytics. We're a Facebook kind of gang. We don't have a very big audience there, so. Okay, so this is me. This is a campaign we did around Standing Rock. It was part of an initiative that we did with Google, which was we're in the last iteration of it now, but it's a 6-part breaking news project where we basically have the mandate to go to a breaking news event, which we determined to be Standing Rock. And within 48 hours of landing, we have to turn around a news piece, and within 5 days of that, we have to turn around another one. So as you can imagine, and it has to be all using their jump camera system, which has some logistical issues in terms of you have to upload the footage, it cloud stitches. So this is episode 1, and this is the first piece released. With this, this came on the heels of the Haiti piece, which was also a breaking news one, and we were worried that we didn't really move the needle as much as we wanted to with Haiti. And so we went into Standing Rock with a whole different strategy, which was partnering with an organization called DIAS, which is a small kind of multimedia cultural organization based out of Toronto. And the way we kind of tag team what this was is we had a ton of obviously great resources as storytellers and mobilizing 360 and other types of video capture and print and all that. And they had a lot of great connections. So they were really close with like Shailene Woodley, Ezra Miller, Mark Ruffalo, these celebrity activists who had gotten involved with Standing Rock. And so what we did is we kind of partnered with them to use some of our, they knew that we had a pretty sizable audience that was interested in this story. We were, at this point in time, Standing Rock hadn't really broken the national bubble yet. And as you'll come to find, then basically the night that we left is November 20th when they hose those people down in freezing water, and that's kind of when within 4 days of that is when CNN and all the major news outlets were there. And so, as a mixture for us of really good timing, we sensed that something was afoot, and we went out there. And apart from the 360 stuff, which didn't even drive, a narrow percentage probably of the impressions what we got. As you can see, these are some great photos that our friend Taliesin took. Some of which, understanding this too is that this had been a kind of a summation of several months of trips we had taken out there. And so we had kind of been embedding there for a while. By the time we went out there with our big crew, we'd already been out there, I think, 4 times, starting in August or September. So, so if you go over to the next, if you go actually to the other Facebook link right there, the next one right there, yes. So while we were there, we kind of anticipated that without some initial interest in our coverage, it was going to be difficult for us to get a lot of eyeballs on this. And we knew that there's going to be some, celebrity activists there. And so through Dias, they helped coordinate. We did this live stream with some elder leaders. We did actually, on 2 different days, we did a bunch of different live streams. Some with a huge crew, some with, just a couple of the influencers and tribal elders. You can skim forward a little bit. I think this one was, this was Francis Fisher and Mark Ruffalo. And this is with one of the tribal youth leaders and some of the elder youth leaders. And so this was a way that we had started to, we used, Facebook Live, which is now a popular feature that Facebook's really interested in pushing, to sort of generate some preliminary interest in our coverage of it. And so in many ways, we were priming our audiences and tapping into their audiences, knowing that algorithmically, when we reached out to them again with this type of content, if they liked it, that they would be more apt to interact with it.
Also knowing that every single time you go live, it pings your entire audience. So every single time we went live, everyone who follows us knew that we were doing this piece of content.
And everyone who follows Mark and all these other influencers, which are much more people than we have in our network, were pinged as well. So instantly we created an audience that wasn't there. And it's a temporary audience because since then, we haven't tapped these people, but we created this atmosphere around Standing Rock through this initial sort of influencer outreach. If you want to hop back out. By the time we left on Sunday, if you want to go over to the first Facebook video here. By the time we left on Sunday, this video was posted on November 21st. So this is footage that our friends from Deus had captured. These are people being sprayed down in sub-zero temperatures by fire hoses over a fire they didn't start. And we were getting notice of this stuff as it was happening. We were getting the text messages. They had the video to us within 2 hours. They were still wet when the video was being uploaded to us. And we had the videos turned around by the morning. This video ended up getting 15 million views just on Facebook. We were able to mobilize even outside of that initial activist network who were there. We got, if you exit out of this, we had Leonardo DiCaprio took an interest in it. He had a tweet here where he shared this very same video. He also shared it on Instagram. So we instantly took that audience that we'd already started developing, while we were there, and augmented it by, by a power of 10. And so now we had this potential reach that was just incredible. And as that was happening, the national mood around it was changing, and there's a lot of social media chatter. But we'd already positioned ourselves through some of the content that we had as kind of a leader in the coverage of this. And so now people were being directed to our content first because we had got the scoop at the right time with the right people, and we'd opened up a very wide potential audience. And so going back to, this is Mark, this was him helping amplify the live stream prior to that. So there's a lot of effort, and the reason why this was the most successful of our campaigns is because we took a lot of effort. Even though we didn't have our best content yet, we were opening up the audience, right? We were opening up people's ears to this issue. And so when you go back to the landing page, so when we presented people with this, which was obviously, it took a lot more time. We had to develop the landing page. We had these photographs that had to be, processed, and copy that had to be written, and artwork that had to be made. We had a whole audience that we could reach because we had positioned ourselves as leaders in this. And so in many ways, even though our initial mandate was to go out and capture 360, we moved the needle through everything else, through our preemptive efforts and generating interest through the live streams and through the timely release of content that helped create a trending topic in social media. So overall, I think this is, in terms of like reach and influence in that respect, this was our most successful of these projects, and it's one that we're certainly very proud of. And in different ways, in comparing it to the Women's March, which was also initially a Google breaking news thing, it was one that we were able to leverage influencers, a lot more. And with the breaking news one that they did in the Women's March, they really tapped into the media and got the media to talk about us, which is significant. So I think that the takeaway there is, how do you get other people to talk about the content you're creating if you have a smaller audience to begin with, which I think most of us are probably working from, because it took us years to build 1 million followers on Facebook, but the reach that we had was as if we had, 50, 60 million followers because of the networks that we tapped to outside of that. So that's the takeaway from this and even the Women's March coverage as well.
I also just want to add that I think one thing that helped us here too is that we approach the content in a way that it's still relevant. So it's still being circulated because it still has relevance today, which I think helped.
Which the social media content doesn't, right? Like the November 20th stuff already happened. The photographs are what still, resonate with people in those images. And so you build those things. The landing page is what keeps people coming back, and that's kind of and the 360 documentaries are what keep people engaged in it.
So, yeah, by the way, I love everything that Riot does. I worked for Riot for a hot second, and they are a fantastic team and fantastic company doing really incredible work. So I'm Jen. I don't nearly have an engaging presentation like my fellow panelists, but I want to keep mine brief and kind of a little bit more to the point. So quick question, how many of you guys are actually interested in 360 content creation? Great, so there's a good chunk of you guys here. A lot of what my workshop studies will actually be is kind of going through all the trends and various production pipelines. 12:15, we're focused a lot on more entertainment content, and right now we're actually starting to shift our focus a little bit more to premium music experiences. So if you guys got to see what I was demoing out there, don't tell anyone because it's not released. So just a couple of photos that we went through. The bottom three are actually all from a festival that we just did called Aaron Style, where they built a 16-foot story ski jump in downtown LA and invited professional snowboarders to come. And at the same time, there was a music festival happening. And what I used Aaron Style to do was basically start experimenting with different horizons and seeing, can I start cutting in different horizons within a 360 video, and is it jarring, and playing with different techniques in that regard. So this your left photo, the bottom left photo is actually one of the snowboarders jumping off, and instead of capturing this at a flat horizon, we actually tilted it up, and it gave us a really cool perspective because all of a sudden now when you're looking in the video, naturally your gaze feels like you're doing this when you're actually doing this. So it can have jarring effects, and right now we're kind of just playing with how can we incorporate this in, because I think it's an artistic choice. The bottom two, that's Chromeo and that's Flume. And if you ever capture content like that, I'm gonna tell you, it's not very interesting to capture content from this side of the stage, but it makes for a great Instagram photo for you social media folks. Up top, I directed a music video, a VR music video for an artist named Banks. She's really big in alternative indie music. And what was really interesting here was this camera, these two photos were actually from the same scene where we had in our production design statues all around her, and she was doing choreography around the set. And what I wanted to do was have a vertical moves halfway through the song. So basically what we did was we had two jump cameras, and we had one preset on a vertical dolly, the other one preset on sticks, and we had to match them. And halfway through the song, we actually cut out of the sticks, flew the sticks out, and basically tried to perfectly match the vertical dolly in place of the stick. So that way we were able to cut back into the song and have the camera drop with the dancers, which was really incredible. And another thing is we talk about 360 video as storytelling, and the thing is it's another medium for storytelling, which I think is really great, but at the same time, I feel like we have lost sight that 360 video is a medium that's an art form as well. And using things that we learned in traditional VFX as well as, I think VR is this intersection of theater, games, and entertainment. So taking our favorite elements out of theater, like the lighting design, and taking our favorite things out of games, whether that's the narrative design that still allows interactivity, and trying to incorporate that into 360 videos. So up here was a scene where we just used a very simple VFX. And in the original one, it's actually just her in the headdress and one set of kids. But I talked to my VFX artist and I said, I want this scene to be like a kaleidoscope. Like, we shot it in black, let's crush the blacks. What can we do to cheat the shot? And what he did was actually kind of duplicate and flip the footage. And so when you look at it in a headset, you're looking all around you, and you're just surrounded by this beautiful light that you don't even see the source coming in from. And there's so many ways to cheat shooting 360 video like that. And it doesn't only have implications for what 360 video looks like in entertainment. You can use it for documentary work. You can use it for any work that really has, where you want a scene that has a little bit more as long as it contributes to your narrative, if that makes sense. So a lot of my workshop will be kind of going over different post flows, different camera types, what's currently out right now. And yeah, if you want to talk about storytelling, I'm teaching a 360 filmmaking class, and I also have my intro class slides. Sorry, I can't speak English. Queued up, so we can go over 360 storytelling as well, in addition to trends, production tools, and all that good jazz.
All right. So now that you kind of know and get a sense of what our skills are and where our strengths lie, I wanted to open up some questions to the gang, because I think the idea now is how can we distill all of our insights into sort of actionable tools that you all can add to your storytelling repertoire. And I think that the question that I'd like to open with, and I think for any of you that feel compelled to answer, is how do you characterize good storytelling?
I think I talked a little bit about it earlier, but I think to me a good story is multidimensional. I don't think a good story is ever one story. I studied fiction in college. I was a short story writer, and I think it makes a lot of sense now that I work in video, because in both short stories and short videos, I think the biggest challenge is capturing a story and doing so quickly. I think, yeah, the multidimensionality of a story is something that makes it great.
Alex?
Yeah, there we go. For me, story is something that helps elicit both emotion and insight, essentially. So from the motion aspect, when you end up reading the story, watching the story, you feel something. It sparks something just in you that you can somehow identify with it, and usually that's identification through emotion. And then from the insight perspective, it's really something that you went into it just wanting to see something, and you came out knowing more about something than you knew before, or at very least seeing something from maybe a new dimension or a new angle, similar to what Avery was saying with the multi-dimensional part. Just learning something new, because once you've come out of it with both of those things, that's what really captures your soul and helps you remember it in the future. That
comes down to perspective too, I think. We did a piece in partnership with 2 directors called Behind the Fence, and it's about a genocide in Myanmar, in Burma. And one of the most heart-wrenching parts about it is the different perspectives that they use to really place you inside this genocide. So in one scene, you're actually standing inside a grave as they're digging it. I think that's something that virtual reality and 360 immersive content can really do for us, is it can show us a new perspective in a way that we normally wouldn't experience.
Jen?
Oh, well, I think they did a really good job of covering, but at least for me, I don't know if this sounds cheesy, but I feel like there is no such thing as a good story. There are a lot of stories, and some stories are going to resonate with us more than others, because I don't think the world is black and white like that. I think, there could be a VR experience that I truly love, but half of you guys hate. And that just comes down to a difference in preference. And I think that, if anything, just highlights the need for a diverse slate of content, especially in a new medium like this. Like, stories make us feel. If it makes you feel, it elicited something and it did something. So wouldn't it be considered an effective story? And now is effective synonymous to good? It all depends on your perspective on that.
So kind of like following up on them then, whether it's good storytelling or effective storytelling, I'm curious if you all think, and at a broad level, it doesn't have to be just specific to VR, if there are such thing as best practices, and then we can kind of follow up with that, because I'm not sure if everyone agrees if there aren't best practices for good storytelling, and if there are, kind of what are some of the ones that we can hone in on that would be relevant for all of us here to take home.
From my perspective, especially working with a lot of different brands and companies, and this by no means means that you have to have this, but whenever possible, I recommend show the personal aspect, and by that, someone's own personal point of view from it. As much as we want to say, so let's say Google Cardboard, great, Google Cardboard looks nice, you can see what it does. I want to see a person using it. In this sort of storytelling aspect, when you're showing this product and people can connect with the people who are impacted by it or who are benefiting from it, to me, that always seems to make things that much more powerful.
I think for a new medium like this, we're still trying to determine what the best practices are, and I think the way to do it is to continue to break the rules. I think that's something that I love about Riot, is that we're continuously experimenting and failing, and picking ourselves back up again and trying again. And in doing so, I think we're really building, the foundations of what best practices in this new medium could be. But until we're all experts in it, which I don't think any of us are, I don't think best practices are necessary.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement. It's an even playing field, and Ben mentioned it earlier. You can be 55 with 20 years of filmmaking, and you could be 22, and you guys are on the exact same playing field in terms of experience, because we're all just still figuring this out. I mean, the thing is VR is just a new medium for storytelling to exist in. So we can't take what necessarily worked for us in film and all these other mediums and shove it into VR expecting for it to work. And I think that's what a lot of major filmmakers right now are figuring out. But at the same time, what's great is it means take risks, because now's the time to do it. And you got to be on the forefront of defining what this medium is. And I think that's just in terms of storytelling in general. I mean, look at Moonlight, the $1 million budget, won like film of the year. That's incredible. It was a groundbreaking film, and they did something that like film has been around for over like about 100 years now, and they basically took what worked for them and they experimented and they took risk, and it got them a great reward.
Sounds to me like maybe there is a best practice, and the best practice is to break the rules. But in a bit of a contrarian tone on this, I do think that at some point, I mean, and it hasn't quite settled out yet for VR, and so I think it's easy to say there aren't best practices, but I think that with any medium, the refining of it, I mean, I think at very technical levels with VR, we have some certain things like don't move the camera too shaky, and try to keep, don't like have the camera at a certain height when you're connecting people at an eye level and things. There's certain technical things and there's certain narrative things that I think we've already started to hone in on, are like do's and don'ts. And so I think it is important to start identifying what those are, and you kind of shed and they change. And if one of the best practices is breaking the rules, you've got to start making some rules to begin with. And so, so yeah, I guess like my encouragement would be to find what, especially as we talk about packaging things in a multimedia sense, look at what's working right now, and that's like, that's looking at things that are working right now and that aren't oversaturated. What are the popular formats? And I think, Alex will probably speak to it a bit more in terms of the analytics, but I think there are ways to look at analytics and have that inform. So even if we don't have a clear sense of what those best practices are, I think there's ways to tap into the way our audiences react to them. So that's what I would say on that.
Just a quick add, because I think breaking the rules is just so important in general. I think one of the best examples, starting off where I was talking about, show it from a person's perspective or bring the personal touch into it. A great example of breaking the rules has always been Pixar, because it's so good at taking these objects like the lamp, or even with its short films like the birds or the volcanoes, and showing that as something entirely new, but yet something we can emotionally connect with. Breaking the rules is just so important, but you have to know what you're doing first to do it, I think is the key.
I also think it's a matter of breaking your own patterns, because if you find that you're doing something over and over again, not only are you not learning from it, but you're potentially drying out your audience from what they're seeing.
Yeah, and Avery's pretty new on the block for Riot, but she's had a huge impact already, and she came in with literally zero, in terms of being a content creator in 360 and with zero experience, and has already had such an influence on the way we've changed because she helped us break some of the patterns. You know, we have certain things that we fight for, you know, and then we butt heads over, but there's other things that we've, you know, shifted because we had a fresh set of eyes. So I think that's also really key, is to make sure that you don't turn into your own little echo chamber of how you're developing, you know, these sort of best practices or how you want to approach the content creation. But I think, you know, and the reason why those things are important is because ultimately I think our goal is, no matter what, is to engage our audiences. And so how are we seeing distribution change to the different ways that we're looking at audience engagement than say in the early days of Facebook, or, you know, and kind of the post-Facebook wave? How is distribution changing, and especially with a new medium like this? Because we need to be, you know, keen to how those shifts and where those winds are blowing, if we want to effectively engage our audiences.
I'll just start out the, I guess, thoughts of things. And this is a non-VR example, but I think for me, one of the more interesting distribution changes that I have been able to just experience myself has been Pinterest. So you take things like recipes or shopping and like that, and you know, you could advertise it before, and recipes, that was a hard market to sort of, I guess, you make a website and you just start listing them there. But with Pinterest, it became very interesting because people could almost start taking these and collecting them on this personal level, that then very quickly became a very powerful method of distribution, especially for, you know, especially a lot of fashion retailers. You have like interior design, even the wedding sort of syndicate. Because people were able to take all of these pieces of content, make them their own and personal in these Pinterest boards, and then ultimately, you know, I guess make money off that.
And looking at VR specifically, we're starting to see a shift towards physical activations. So a lot of marketing dollars are going into that. I think right now, just from observation over the past about 2.5 years-ish, is a lot of the people that are paying for content happen to be brands. So we're seeing a lot of branded content, but through the branded content, we're seeing physical activations. And that's another way for content companies, specifically production companies that are doing this, to get more dollars, because oftentimes VR is expensive and you're finding brands don't necessarily want to pay the full price. So people will underbid to get jobs, but to make up for that, they're like, oh, we'll do a brand activation. And so it's like, how many of you guys have heard of Coachella? Great. Yay, we're all hip, guys. It's like Coachella. There's been a lot of talks and a lot of people trying to do a major brand activation around Coachella. Could you imagine going to someone like Corona or Heineken and say, yo, I have a 20-foot by 20-foot space at Coachella, like in the middle of the festival, that your brand can sponsor the entire VR activation for? Like, that is an easy like sell for $150,000 for a brand. They'd be all like, oh, Coachella and us having our own 20-foot by 20-foot area with VR, like, yes, like, here you go. So I'm definitely starting to see a lot more of that happening in the space.
I think when the social media platforms first started to rise, we had a kind of like gold rush mentality with content. So we posted as much as possible on every platform, as often as possible. I think now that we're starting to understand what each platform can do for us, we're starting to get much more strategic about what we post and when, so that we're not centering you know, our content around cadence so much as the particular story. So we're much more kind of, I think, in tune now in terms of what to distribute where. It's not necessarily a blanket approach anymore.
So with that shift, and Alex, maybe, you know, at a kind of like more scientific level, this is where your expertise really stands out. How are, now understanding that so much has shifted in just the last few years and how we distribute this content, how are we reacting to that in terms of measuring those insights, particularly when it becomes much more vague, like a physical activation, or some of these more walled off, you know, social networks where they only give you, you know, where the data is more piecemeal, whereas it used to be on a website you could collect as much data as, you know, your heart desired. And then how do storytellers interact with that information?
Yeah, so we'll take actually Coachella, I think, as a bit of an example for this, because so all of these, obviously, how do you measure something like VR? Honestly, the fun thing about it is you take it back to the basics. You catch people going in like, hey, do you have any interest in this sort of stuff? And then you catch them coming out like, what do you feel about it now? It's that sort of going back to surveying just in real time these people who are doing things. And then also with social media, we can take it that sort of extra step and start looking at how are they taking that sort of what they've learned, that thing they're viewing, and are they spreading the conversation? We can look at the sentiment aspect of things. Did they like what they saw? Did they thought it was a waste of their time when all of these bans were going on? Most of the roots of analytics are not changing. Yes, there are brand new ways of how we're going to end up measuring certain things and new different details of how we can get into things. But again, just the root elements of what we're looking at, they're relatively the same.
Aves, I know that how when, particularly when you're at Carrot, how did you guys, because there's a lot more, I wouldn't say there's more at stake, but seems like you have to be very reactive to some of this data that you're getting back and sometimes in the middle of campaigns and altering course. Is there any, what has been your experience in terms of interacting with those sort of analytics and insights that get
Sure,
back?
and I'm sure you all probably do the same thing when you see, sometimes an activation just doesn't work. If you look at that, YouTube example, maybe you put that out there, great, it got a lot of views, but maybe you were aiming for engagements. You wanted to change people's mind about something. And if it doesn't work on one platform, that's where you just bring everybody back together and rethink some of it. The point of activations and really doing things, it should never be 100% reliant on one thing and 100% set in stone, because doing that honestly can set yourself up for failure. You got to be flexible in this very digital world and be ready to sort of pivot on a dime. And that's where analytics can definitely come in and help. You always want to start with a benchmark. You want to start with something that you can measure it by. You want to start with goals. What are you trying to aim for? And then evaluate during the process. And within that evaluation, if you find out something's not working, go back to the brainstorm room and let's see if we can figure out a new way to spin it, new way to shift it to try to reach that impact you're aiming for in the first place.
I also think that's why A and B testing is always a really great approach, especially when you're working with a brand, because not only are you diversifying your content and diversifying who you're speaking to, but you're really giving yourself and your client the opportunity to learn from the success or failure of what you're doing. When I worked with Ubisoft, I was working on a sword fighting game called For Honor. It's my best piece of work yet. And we did a lot of A and B testing with them, especially when we were doing like our kind of first step of the campaign. It always had an A and a B. And so that kind of, the learnings from that always helped informed the second iteration of our campaign, so that we knew whatever we were doing and whatever that they were putting money into was going to be as successful as possible.
As a quick sort of add to that, A/B testing doesn't have to be hard either, especially if you're thinking from the social media perspective. Maybe you're considering spending money on a social paid promotion. Especially on Facebook, it's actually very easy to A/B test and very cheap, because you can set up these, statistically relevant but still small sample sizes, maybe have the same image but two different lines of copy, throw those out into the water and see what performs better before you decide to spend a lot of money on that exact same promotion. And that can just help overall maximize the success of your content.
Jen, just kind of bringing it back to VR where the analytics are pretty slim. We do have some heat maps and all that. How has it been in terms of like, okay, we're trying to make this a legitimate, incredible medium that, not only, storytellers and artists utilize, but brands turn to. So how are you, in the absence of these analytics, what kind of data is it? Is a qualitative approach to this? Like, how do you guys, correct course?
Yeah, the thing is like with heat maps, sometimes they can benefit, but at the same time they can hurt. For example, if you make a branded piece and you're doing product placement in your 360 video and you have a heat map, and the heat map shows that they're not looking at the product placement at all, like it's kind of like they're going to be like, why did we just give you $120,000 to make that video, you know? But at the same time, the thing that I see with the heat maps is, yes, it shows you where the person is generally looking, but it's not accurate enough to eye rendering. And I think once we're actually doing eye rendering and tracking our pupils, that's when heat maps will be heat maps. At that point, they'll be like eye tracking maps. Will actually be really interesting. But then you get into a whole social issue of like, whoa, that's a lot of personal data that we're giving up, and who gets access to this data. Could you imagine if marketers, especially people that do media buys, got access to that and they were able to target you based off of all the 360 videos you've watched and the things that attracted you the most? It's a little scary. A lot of the stuff that we've also realized is a lot of times people don't watch a 360 video on the web longer than 30 seconds, which tells me as a storyteller, I have 30 seconds to really engage my audience to get them to continue to watch the rest of this 2-minute piece, or I'm going to lose them. If you get about 3/4 of your video, I would say you did a pretty good job of keeping them engaged. Another interesting thing that's, I think a benefit of web VR with things like Facebook 360 is people don't have to interact with it like a 360 video, although most of the time it does behoove them to do that. That's why we shot it in 360. But, people can play the audio and they'll watch the video and they'll be like, oh, like that's it. And it's like, well, at least they watched it. But, it's slowly educating mass markets that you can look around, and it's still really new. And I think the data that's going to be valuable, the tech just isn't there to track it yet, at least in my opinion.
It's funny too, because we get heat maps on our Facebook videos. So you have to hit a certain threshold for them to activate it. And sometimes the data you get is actually like, you don't realize it, but it's totally like inconsequential. Like for instance, like we were noticing that a bunch of our heat maps on our videos, and the heat map, for those of you guys who know, just shows where people are looking, basically, right? And it was like this instant, people were looking down. It's like when I watch 360 videos, I don't look at the ground. When I open a door, the first thing I don't do is look at the ground. Like, who are these people that are staring at the ground? And then realized most of our views were happening on mobile. And a lot of people are browsing through their feed like this, and Facebook's gyroscopic, or the iPhone gyroscope, can detect that you're down here. They want to make sure that your horizon's level. So literally, as people are opening videos and starting, for a while we're like, should we be placing something on the ground? Is that a space that should we be utilizing? But it's actually just inconsequential data that is really a consequence of how they're consuming it. Like, yeah, maybe from a brand we'd sell a little like doormat banner ad, maybe, I don't know, but that doesn't necessarily, that's not something that, like, if we're trying to correct course on how we tell stories, that's not something that's necessarily going to be really useful to us. So I think it's also sifting through what of that data is actually meaningful and what's the cause of some of these outliers in our performance. And if it's just a consequence of environment or whatever, then those are things that I think we have to give less weight to than others, which maybe in subtle ways really have huge impacts in our storytelling.
Well, I think everything that you just said, I think what these platforms need to do that are hosting these 360 videos, I didn't say this, came from somewhere else, but I think they actually need to look at this data. And I think right now what's happening is it is among the big platforms, there is a rush right now. I mean, between when Facebook acquired Oculus, that was one thing, but now it's like, are Facebook and Oculus competing? Why isn't the Facebook feed the native video feed when you go into the Samsung Gear VR experience? Like, there's a lot of really interesting things, and so you're starting to see Oculus be rebranded as Oculus powered by Facebook, and before it was like Oculus brought to you by Facebook, and before it was just Oculus. And so now I think you're seeing these major players, the people that actually have money to invest in this content and whatnot, are still figuring it out. You have YouTube, who was actually very much at the forefront of 360 videos. They were one of the first platforms that had 360 video integration. They were the first platform to have 360 video live integration, and Facebook kind of just ripped off of that. But like, YouTube still has a lot of things that they need to figure out. And so I think they all need to figure out what their branding is and what exactly does their platform mean to them before they can even start addressing these issues that content creators are having. But it's also something that I think they're aware of. It's just not high on their priority list right now.
Which is one of the interesting challenges, is that while we're learning, the platforms that we're hosting our content on are also learning with us.
So at this point, I wanted to turn it over to y'all. I'm sure you have some questions for the gang before we go out into the workshops. So do we have a microphone we can? Okay, that's fine. So we're gonna pass this one around.
Thanks.
Who's got a question?
Please don't tweet that one. For me, it's qualitative and quantitative. I think when we create a piece that we really care about and we know that we're proud of, that to me is a success. That is a personal success. It's a professional success. Sometimes the pieces that are more successful to us qualitatively aren't as successful to us quantitatively. But I think it's a balance.
And I can add, so from specific client perspective, sometimes they'll have very, very explicit ideas of what they consider to be success. So take, for instance, YMCA's Healthy Kids, I think it's, a day, and I think it technically kicks off a week of activities for them. But back when working for them, this is a national sort of thing. Tons of media everywhere for it. What ended up being the most important success metric for them was they got in the USA Today's first page with one of those graphics on the data of how kids are unhealthy. And it was just a small graphic, but across this large campaign, that was something that was the most meaningful to them. So I think as you're going into these projects, it is up to you, the content creator, or in my case, usually the client, for what you define as success. And that's not to say that other important outcomes can't come out of that, but you always have to have your sort of eye on the goal in the first place.
I think that obviously we want a bunch of eye-popping, views, and we want people to write about us and all that. But even the instances where where the content that you spent so much time and so much energy, we're going through this right now we just wrapped up our Hulu show, which is the first serialized news show in VR and we're having struggles with it because right now it's exclusive to the Daydream platform, which is on Google's Pixel phone. So there's all these really narrow, this is what we consider our best of the best of the 360 stuff we've done in terms of the visual quality, the storytelling, the editing, and not a lot of people have seen it, and we're really, so, but in a way it was a success for us because now it's set us up to do the next iteration of that and do it in a way that, we tackle some of the distribution challenges. So oftentimes the success is that we've given ourselves an opportunity to learn from, and in doing so, if we were to quit when we failed, we would have never, gotten, if we stopped doing the Google thing because we didn't get as many views as we wanted when the Haiti thing, then the Standing Rock thing would have never happened, and we had a huge success off that. And we played off of a lot of things that we didn't do enough of that on the ground attention, building. So even the failures can serve to you as a stepping stone and as an internal. It's an internal victory to have something to be able to measure yourself against. Because otherwise, if the other option is inaction, and that offers us nothing.
I think every 360 video that we've done so far, I've always had one thing specifically that I focused on. Like the Banks video, that was, I wanted to, as a director, nail an aesthetic style. And I wanted the piece to be very stylized. And the fact that people came out of it commenting on the lighting was gorgeous. Like, I saw so much happening. I would love to go back and watch it again because I felt like I would miss something. That to me was a success because it was like I was able to really hone in and focus on something. And I think like with each piece, instead of going, at least for me, it was just finding one thing that I really wanted to focus on. If we're focusing on storytelling, it's like, why are we tackling it all at once? We don't have to figure it out all at once. We can find the elements that worked for us, and it allows room for more experimentation. If I go like, oh, this time I actually we did a women's march piece as well, definitely not to the scale that Riot did, but we captured it in LA, doing a lot of filming on the stage with people giving the speeches. And it was like, okay, well, due to some technical reason, we lost half of our footage, and we still wanted to craft a story. So what I considered successful out of that piece was how we were able to go through content that was already captured and taking sexism audio clips and taking, audio clips from news channels about people commenting on how many people came to our women's march or came to the LA Women's March, and crafting a story from that. Like, that to me was a success for the piece. The amount of views that it gets, obviously we want as many people to see it as possible, but it didn't matter to me because the people that watched it had relatively good positive feedback. And I was like, that's all that matters, is that it resonated with those few people and we were still able to make the story with what we were given. If that makes sense.
So Tara, what's your hypothetical? What would your goal be?
I'm gonna let you know a little secret about the AR stuff is that it's really, 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 really easy. The first time I ever did an AR thing, that actually the Louvre Museum with the kids, there's a web-based platform called LayAR, L-A-Y-A-R. I mean, it's as simple as uploading a photo and then uploading a video and like dragging the thing over it, and then you just hit test and you download their app, and their app looks just like ours that you have on there, and it does what you want it to do. I figured it out. The first AR demo I ever did took me like 15 minutes to do. So there's tools out there. Now, the reason why we do ours through our own system is we want it to pop up, right away and be really sticky. LayAR has to, pull it down from a server, so sometimes it's a little slower to load. But, I think the industry in general around, immersive formats is shifting to be as consumer friendly as possible. We went down to, Samsung has this little golf ball camera. There's tons of these the thing that was right here recording, a lot attached to phones. There's a lot of consumer cameras that are coming out and consumer software and consumer products that are intended for just that. I think the idea is to definitely democratize it and stop making it such an exclusive thing that requires a supercomputer and 57 cameras and things that look like snakes of cables and all that stuff. Obviously, I think we'll probably still do that stuff because we kind of nerd out and on the cool stuff, but the mediums is already shifting to make it easier for you to access that, and yeah.
And like, for example, I was just playing with the microphone stand because I thought it might be relevant. It's totally relevant because if you have a Samsung camera and you take this head off, you're gonna get a 3/4 inch screw, and you just have to get a 3/4 inch screw to a 1/4 inch, and you can pop a 360 camera on that, and lo and behold, you have, you know, the Samsung Gear 360 on a microphone stand, and you can have that with you in the medical unit taking BTS roll, and you literally just hit record. It records. You put the footage into a computer and you pop it into iMovie, and next thing you know, you got yourself a 360 video for whatever purposes and needs that you want. I'll be diving a little deeper into those potential workflows and the cameras that are available for stuff like that too in the workshop. And if you're not going to my workshop, you can find me after and I can send you all the information.
And those kind of camera connectors are like $15 at Best Buy. So definitely within reach of really any team. I can go ahead and, oh, no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, or like $2 at a hardware store.
Yeah, there you go. So I'll go ahead and add, I guess, from the analytics perspective. So in that sort of example that you said, to me, the best way to analyze it is if you put it on Facebook, you put it on Twitter, you put it on, you know, who knows, Instagram, something. The comments are more important than you could possibly imagine because I always consider comments to be, in some ways, one of the more, if not sometimes the most important engagement aspect. Because when you have a like, someone took the time to click a button. When you have a like a retweet or a share, similarly, they took their time to click a button, but they wanted someone else to see it. With a comment, they want to tell you something. They want to, or express to the rest of the people watching this video something that they learned, or just, something in general. So, for instance, in this case, do a video, do something, look at the comments, see what you feel the feedback was from that, learn from it, use that as a benchmark, a baseline, do it again. If you change certain things about the way you do the video, are you changing the comments? You can essentially learn from those past experiences just by getting that kind of feedback. And if you definitely want comments, if you want to inspire people to do them, maybe ask a question or something at the end of your video. And that will overall inspire people a little more maybe to take that action.
I'd also just say that I think a lot of our success, we're actually a very small team. There's only 6 of us on the editorial team currently. And I think a lot of our success has been because we've reached out to a larger network. I'm constantly trying to work with people who know what they're doing more than we know what we're doing, or who can give us access to a different audience or different tools. Right now we're entering into a partnership with The Intercept. They do a lot of investigative journalism, and that's just something that we don't have the bandwidth, the time, the knowledge, or the resources to do. But we know that in partnering with them, that'll give us access to something that we wouldn't have previously had. So I think just making friends with people and reaching out to people who can help you and who you can help them. The benefit for them in that relationship is that we have a 360 team and they don't. So there's always a mutual benefit in a relationship like that.
And in our right. I was gonna say too, in Riot's early days, we used to do these like content swap partnerships where, if you guys know the Dodo, when they were kind of on the up to, we used to just like, they had a little bit bigger than ours, so we would share 2 of their pieces a week and they'd share 1 of ours. But there's so many, I'm sure there's even right on campus, there's tons of small micro community, who all have the same issues where they have these undermanned units trying to like message out to, not just here, but alumni and elsewhere. And so tapping into those networks to, kind of cross-pollinate each other's networks, I think is a really powerful way to start that process.
And I'll add, pay people for their internships, or at least give them some sort of physical benefit. We are past the point where art and visibility is enough compensation.
Hallelujah. So the question was, with smaller organizations, it's sometimes easy to have your content come off as kind of like inauthentic or of subpar quality relative to other organizations. How do you avoid How do you avoid being perceived that way with limited resources and a small reach?
I think one example, as you're doing something or once you have the finished product, show it to somebody or give it to somebody who has no idea what you do or has no idea like the root of that element. Hopefully somebody who wouldn't like leak it to somebody if it's that important, but you always need an outsider's perspective on this. I don't know how many times I have like done some analytical research on something, handed it to somebody else and say, okay, what do you see? Before I even tell them what I saw, you'll be amazed how many different versions of things individual people have. And that's hugely important to getting that idea of what other people will interpret your work as.
I think in addition to getting feedback is, obviously intern labor should never be free, but feedback from and input and advice from people who have some stake in what you're doing or have some connection to you, friends of the family, people, alumni, people who within your network, maybe they're like so cool that they're consultants and they get paid to do it. But I think that getting professional feedback from people is not that hard. It's just a matter of how you ask people for that and the extent to which you ask them to get involved. Don't ask them to all of a sudden become your mentor and spend 3 hours a week consulting you. But I think that it's easy to get feedback right off the bat from people who are experts. I've had classes. Last semester I had a class, a group of students from a college in Cleveland. I can't remember the name of it. Sent me their 360 piece, and I spent 10 minutes of my time just giving them like my quick rundown. They literally just cold called me. They just looked me up on the website, and I sent them my feedback. I'm a pretty nice guy and I'm pretty charitable, but I think that like there's probably a lot of people out there that are willing to do that for others. So it's not that hard to ask.
And the VR community is really small right now. And there's this amazing thing called Women in VR. If you go to www.facebook.com/group/women in VR, we offer feedback all the time. And you're getting feedback from, people at Ben's caliber, people at Avery's caliber, and you're getting feedback from, the missing pieces of the world, the VR playhouses of the world, the people who are leading in production. They're more than happy to comment going like, hey, I see this error or I see this as a thing. And even then, if you're running into production problems, you're able to post it in there and you're able to kind of do your research on like, how's the best way for me to go about this, and use the group and use the community kind of as a test group before you go out to the public-facing audience, if that makes sense.
Thanks so much, guys. I think at this point we're doing another raffle. And then we're going to prepare to break out into our sessions, which I believe you guys have all signed up for. For those of you that don't know, I believe Avery's workshop is in here. Jen's is in this next room, just behind this brick wall. I'll be in here, and Alex, you're in here? All right, cool.
Thank you guys so much for that. I feel like I've really been learning a lot today, and I hope you guys are ready for more. But before we move on, I am going to do another raffle, so pull out your tickets. All right, if you have ticket number 598128, you are a winner, so raise your hand if that's you. All right, don't be discouraged if you didn't win today. You'll have...
That's what we should do. We should have a race to see who could figure out how to make VR fastest.
All right, guys, don't be discouraged if you didn't win today. You'll have another opportunity after the event is over. I'm going to be sending out an email with a survey to allow you guys to evaluate your experience today. And after you complete that, you'll have the option to give us some contact information to enter in the drawing to win. I would also like to thank our partners, the WVU Reed College of Media, PRSA Pittsburgh, PRSA West Virginia, and the Media Innovation Center for making this event possible. All right, and now on to our breakout sessions. Ben Roffee will be heading Telling Tales, Finding Your Feature, a guide to finding your story and telling it in a way that's going to resonate in the digital sphere. It's going to be in this room to my left. Alex's workshop will be to my right. It's called Mining the Meaningful from the Mess, and it's an expert's guide on insights and analytics. Jen's workshop will be in room 440, which is a little bit down the hall and to the left. It's called Practical Applications for Managing the Media Machine. It's everything you need to know about trends, tools, in production, and immersive storytelling. And lastly, Avery's workshop will be directly behind me in this room. It's called Presenting the Perfect Piece, and it's a guide on how to package and distribute your content. Make sure that you check the back of your name tag to figure out what workshop you signed up for at 2 o'clock. We will have volunteers around to help you if you need it, but thank you guys so much and enjoy.